Hello, guys, and welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Society Local AI Startup Showcase. I'll be hosting the event today. On the first slide, you can see that we have a couple of socials if you'd be interested in following them. We have Discord, LinkedIn, Instagram, and a website. So yeah, let's get started. So this is sort of like the outline for the event. As you can see, we'll have panelist introductions, startup introductions, a discussion, Q&A, a closed Q&A at first, and then we'll have an open Q&A with the audience if you'd like to ask anything specific. And then at the very end, recruitment and connect, so you can actually connect with, our AI showcasers and different members of AIS in the audience. So let's get this underway. So at the very start, we'll have our speaker introductions. We have Vidyanatha Siva. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Felix Healthcare.ai, a prior CTO of the Parkland Center for Clinical Innovation, and prior CTO at Infosys. He studied at IIT Madras and SMU. We also have Hong Kang. He is the Senior Applied Scientist at NLP at Pieces. He is prior research fellow at UT Health. He graduated from a school in Tongji University, and he's interested in deep learning and NLP. So Felix has a proven AI focus on delivering value-added insights and efficiencies in healthcare. They have 5 years of platform investment, 25 plus AI engineers and data scientists, as well as 2 impactful solutions for diagnostic intelligence and document intelligence. They also have 15 proven use cases from like Lightbeam, Omega Healthcare, and CMS.gov, and 7 awards and challenges. A couple listed here from Upstart, Dallas Innovations, Health Outcomes Challenge, Dallas 500, and Change Healthcare. They have multiple patents, 5 current patents and 3 pending ones, and 6 deployment models from like systems you've heard of like AWS or Google Cloud, and then on premises like actual server rooms and such. So we'll start with FelixHealthcare.ai and their company showcase. So Felix Document Intelligence Platform is a highly accurate and fully automated and scalable data entry solution for RCM providers. Its key features are as follows. It has data extraction intelligence, engine ingest EOB documentation, and let me just fix this real quick. All right, cool. Engine ingest EOB documentation. It extracts key elements. Intelligence exception processing with human review only for exceptions. Heat maps and highlighted exceptions for increased review efficiency. So essentially, it's like visualization tool to increase like, the efficiency of different healthcare providers. Document training tool. My bad. Training a new document in 15 minutes with self-serve or provide as a service. And its key benefits are a 1,000 increase in the number of EOBs processed daily. Results surpass automation and other market leaders. 70% cost reduction. Business continuity solution, audited results with 99% accuracy, and onboarding new clients more quickly. So essentially, just increases the efficiency of different healthcare providers. It's incredibly efficient in doing so. And you can see some sort of visualizations of like the documents that we have on the various different photos on the slide, with kind of how they set it up. Explainable AI with face sheets from population to patient level insights. So you can kind of see how this UI works, and it's very, very neat. You have some graphs that kind of show like different indexes, oxygen saturation, blood pressure. So it's very easy to read because traditionally, especially with like a lot of medical documentation, it's printed on like black and white paper. It's sometimes more difficult to discern, but here we have like these very easy to read vitals, and breakdowns of like cost sections and air quality. So it's all just a very intuitive UI, which is very useful in making the health process go underway much better. And I've actually even dealt with like Office Practisium and different like patient indexes and UIs, but like this is like the clearest one I've seen thus far. So as you can see, this is kind of what the system looks like. And we have pieces started by Ruben Aronson at Parkland Health and Hospital Systems with predictive models to prevent hospital readmissions. Started with a PCCI, 50 million in scientific funding, and has 3 main products: Pieces Predict, Pieces Connect, and Pieces Guide. Impacting health systems, community organizations, and people. So it serves a lot. And now we have the Pieces Showcase. So Pieces can achieve an accuracy level of approximately 88% across clinical and non-clinical concepts. So you can quickly view patients' top 3 barriers. And as you can see, it's similarly a very intuitive UI where you can easily have like indexes for different patients and such, the barrier. And here we have a little YouTube video that demonstrates this. It's a day in the life for Pieces.
Today, we're going to walk you through the day in the life of a care manager, Bianca, who is using Pieces to efficiently manage her day and prioritize her patients. At Bianca's hospital, the care teams use Pieces to identify clinical, social, and operational bottlenecks that prevent patients from being discharged in a timely manner. Pieces Predict uses data from the electronic health record to create a discharge list. Pieces automates the identification of discharge barriers early in a patient's day so that the care teams can rapidly prioritize their work without having to spend time reading through the EHR. The goal of this workflow is to help reduce excess length of view her top patients that Pieces has indicated as ready for discharge. She also creates a focused list of patients, personalized just to her, called My List. Once her My List is created, Bianca reviews her patients and notices that patient Dominguez has a pending authorization for an assisted living facility with a potential discharge date of today or tomorrow. She makes a note to bring this up later in rounds. Another patient on our list is projected to discharge tomorrow and will require a walker. Since Bianca will be at her brother's wedding, She makes a note for her coworker to follow up with the vendor to ensure this DME requirement doesn't delay discharge. Comments added to the pieces work list are viewable by all her team members. With her coffee in her hand, Bianca prints out her My List and prepares for her morning case management and nursing huddle. Bianca comes to the huddle every morning with her priority discharge patients and concerns to discuss with the team by using her annotated pieces work list. For the rest of the morning, she continues to resolve barriers and update outstanding issues as she prepares for upcoming MDRs with the full care team at 11 a.m. For example, Pisa's work list flagged patient Norris, who needs a decision maker, as a potential discharge barrier. Bianca marks the barrier as active, indicating her follow-up activities with Adult Protective Services on obtaining guardianship. At 11, Bianca heads to her daily multidisciplinary round. As the huddle is conducted, Bianca is able to provide quick and accurate information to the care team using the Pieces work list she's been curating throughout the morning. During rounds, Dr. Lang asked Bianca about patient Dominguez and his status. Bianca responded she had resolved the pending authorization and the patient would be ready to go as soon as the discharge order was written. Wink, wink, Dr. Lang. As Bianca works through and coordinates care for her patients, she is also able to update her Pieces patient list. Bianca works through each patient on her focused My List, removing barriers that have been resolved and highlighting ones as action items for herself. At the afternoon huddle, Bianca and her charge nurse Rico review the patients that are still on the unit and don't have a discharge order as discussed during MDR. They run through the updated Pieces work list to ensure any patients that are clinically and socially ready for discharge are queued up to do so. By the end of the day, Bianca has done a complete handoff to her fellow care managers for the next shift. During her day, she is able to save valuable time by utilizing her Pieces work list to surface barriers and dedicate that time to his patient care. Now she can head off to her brother's wedding, knowing things have been accurately documented and will be translated over to her team.
So as you can see, this sort of practical application of the pieces software in a medical or healthcare environment, it both increases the efficiency of and like the use of like notes from like nurses or RNs, and it also increases like the patient satisfaction because you have like a better documentation of the various different specifications to a patient's stay. So that helps with the flow. There we go. Anyways, now we have a discussion section, which will talk about vision, growth, Dallas specifically, impact, and technology in that order. So we will be going off to some questions now. So I'll be asking some questions to our two members who are presenting with me. So the first question I want to ask is, what led you guys to decide that you had an idea worth betting on for your respective businesses?
Are you addressing it to both of us?
Yeah, both, but you can answer first if you'd like.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So for me, it was really about making an impact in healthcare and making healthcare easy for the end customer, who we call the patient. So that was the purpose of starting my company, because I had been in healthcare in the past, earlier at Parkland Hospital, and interestingly enough, the organization that preceded Pieces Tech was called Parkland Innovation. Prior to that, I was at Infosys. I was focused on life sciences, so which is on the research side, and I wanted to have an impact on how healthcare is delivered and how it improves the lives of the end patient. So that was the focus. So to generalize, typically, if you want to start a company, you have to find an area that makes it that is of intense passion for you, something that you really, really care about, and you have an idea as to what you can do to make a difference. So in my particular case, each of us has been a patient at some point in time, has actually interacted with the healthcare system. So the shortfalls and where healthcare can actually get better. So you have to have a good idea of, as a user, how you can make the experience better. And then, if you care so passionately about it, then you should try and do something on your own, in which case you can try to start something. Uh, that's really how it has to be something that is very deeply meaningful to you, and that's how you start.
And certainly the patient and physician experience was very meaningful to you, and that was sort of like your calling. I guess that's why inclined you to start with pieces.
Yep.
How about you, Mr. King?
Well, I think I maybe I'm not the best person to answer this question. Representing pieces technology, but yeah, maybe our CEO is the best man, but I can try to answer it based on my understanding. So for our company, now AI technologies, specifically NLP technologies, are developing very fast. But actually, the applications in a clinical domain is limited.
Certainly.
So yeah, it's very low speed for the clinical domain. As far as we know, more than half of the clinical domain models are rule based. So comparing to others other aspect like self-driving and some image identification application domains, it's still very low.
Yeah.
So the company of our purpose is applying those most advanced AI or NLP technologies to help healthcare providers to better manage their daily life. Specifically, we are hoping we could help them to get a better understanding of what's happening to their patients, and they could get a knowledge about how when would the patient be discharged, like the length of stay prediction. With this prediction, probably we could better manage the resources of the hospitals. So, for example, since the year 2020, the COVID, just came out.
Yes.
So a lot of hospital systems were suffering about the clinical resource assignment.
Yeah.
So one of our product related to COVID, we could let them know the distribution of the COVID-related patient or potential COVID patient in all the hospitals under their system. So from which they can better manage their resources, and help the patient better. And also, we are not trying to, like some other scope, trying to use AI to fully replace human, like fully replace physicians or nursing. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to help them to make their life better.
Yeah, because I mean, I've even interacted with like Office Practisium and some more antiquated medical software, and of course, it's very cumbersome and frustrating for the physicians to utilize. But demonstrated with your software, it was just much more clean and usable. So it's very good in increasing the quality of life for physicians and for doctors and patients. It's very good. And on to the second question, directed towards Mr. Shiva. What made you guys pick founding members for your respective company?
Yeah, so see, the reality is that most startups fail. A startup is not even a business. It's a work in progress. It becomes a business when you have demonstrable, sustainable revenues, sustainable profitability. That's really when it is a business. Otherwise, it is still a work in progress. So most startups fail. And the kind of demands a startup makes are tremendous and they are onerous. So on one hand, I'll talk about technology startups. So on one hand, you need to understand the domain extremely well. On the other hand, you need to have a technology solution. And then you have to deal with finances, funding, payroll. You have to deal with operations. managing a lot of resources, then you have to deal with HR, with human capital. So it's typically very unlikely for one person to manage all of that and have all those skills in abundance uh, to be successful in a startup. So what you look for when you're looking for co-founders is the following. Number one, complementary skills. So it's, if you've seen movies like the Second World War, the Guns of Navarone, Forcing from Navarone, and so on. These are highly competent teams with different people having different, specialist skill sets, and then one leader who manages the team and does, tremendous work. So it's like that. You need to have specialists who understand each of those uh, areas and bring those complementary skills to the table. So that is one, which is that's really important. The other skill, the other important thing when you're looking for founders is, do you guys share the same passion?
Of course.
And how good are you as friends? Do you see yourself still being friends if, as is likely, the startup may fail, or goes through a lot of change and a lot of stress? Is your friendship strong enough that it can sustain and it can survive? And do you believe that each of you will have each other's back? So I think these are very important uh, uh, characteristics to look for when you're looking for a founding team. And like Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand.
Yeah.
A lot of times the market does not crush a startup. It is infighting between the founders and some disagreements that actually that bring the startup down. And that is really unfortunate because all these people took such a big bet. And they may have actually found product market fit, but unfortunately the company fails. So it's really important to have A, complementary skills, and B, strength of character, strength of friendship that you can sustain the startup through some really tough times and then come out on the other side with success.
Yes, certainly everyone needs to be like the same page and just fighting for the same goal, But I suppose in growing a startup, sometimes it can go very well, sometimes it can go very poorly. But with regard to growth, what are some growing pains and experience of starting a startup that you feel is like unique and shareable in this context?
Yeah, see, there's this really interesting article which came in MIT Technology Review by Bob Metcalfe. Bob Metcalfe was the founder of a company called 3Com, which was the pioneer in the area of the Ethernet cable. So a pioneer in TCP/IP protocol and setting up the Ethernet LAN within the company premises. And that article is called "Invention is a Flower, Innovation is a Weed." And what he talks about is how when you're running a startup, not only should you plan for the worst outcomes, but you should also plan for success. In this particular case, 3Com became successful way beyond his imagination. And then he was always playing catch up with the market demand. So how do you plan for growth? And growth, that has multiple dimensions. On one hand, again, speaking from a technology standpoint, you have to plan the technology for growth. Many startups, understandably so, they cut corners when they're building their technology, when they, okay, let me have the shortcut and then I'll fix it later. And it adds to what is called technology debt. And at some point in time, you simply cannot band-aid your system anymore. And when it's time to scale, when it's moment of truth, the whole thing comes crashing down. So one of the things which is typically very important to do is to plan for scale, to plan the technology for scale. And the good thing about that is in today's world, with all these platforms that you have available, Amazon's AWS, Google's GCP, Microsoft Azure, you have these founding blocks that are already provided, and it is much easier today for you to build a truly multi-tenant system, which is composed of microservices and enables you to provide elastic scale. So you have things like Docker, you have things like Kubernetes to manage clusters of these Docker containers. So you can manage these systems elastically, and you can also build extensible services and compose extensible services so that when your business pivots, as it most likely will, you're able to compose these services quickly and take advantage of the business opportunities. So that's on the technology side. At the same time, you also have to learn to scale operations. You have to learn to scale the new people who will come and join the company, and they'll have a different set of expectations. And that is where the culture of the company becomes extremely important. What kind of culture do you want to build in your startup? What does the company stand for? Peter Drucker very famously once said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it doesn't matter what your strategy is. If you don't define your culture well, if you don't live it every day, then it'll be difficult to manage scale on the human side. And that's again a reason that companies fail. They're not able to negotiate the scale that is required in terms of the new people coming in and not gelling with the original founder. So to summarize, on one hand, yeah, the technology has to, by design, from first principles, allow for scale. It's much easier today than it was in the days when I started in the dot-com boom and bust. And secondly, establishing the kind of company you want, the kind of culture you want is also extremely important. It allows for an easier transition as you try to grow the company.
So certainly, as you've articulated, there's just a plethora of different things that can inhibit or cause a growth in a respective startup. But as your company has grown, how has your vision changed over time as you guys become more established as a company?
So most companies have to pivot. So as I said, we really wanted to start the company from the perspective of the end user of healthcare, the consumer of healthcare, who is called the patient. And that was our idea. Our idea was to make it, Felix really means happy, good outcomes in Latin. So we wanted the outcomes for the patient and everybody else, all the stakeholders, the providers, the payers, the family members of the patient. We wanted all of them to have healthier and good outcomes. So that was how we started. But again, due to various circumstances and due to the fact that it is not easy, the space that we are in, when you are predicting clinical outcomes, it is really difficult to make the case that your engine works well, and also it is by design. So as a result, you need to have explainable models. It doesn't matter if you're using deep learning, it doesn't matter if you're using graph theory, it doesn't matter if you're using NLP. Ultimately, you have to be able to explain the reason your engine is making some predictions to the folks who operate in that domain, the nurse practitioner, the physician, and so on. So it's a very difficult task, and it took us a long time to do that. But at the same time, we also realized that downstream, there is a lot of friction and a lot of angst in the delivery of healthcare. And that is in the whole claims processing, claims adjudication, final payout of the claim, that whole space. So imagine this is, I'm pretty sure, very common in that somebody has a chronic condition, let us say cancer, and then they go through resection and chemo and radiation. And then 6 months later, 12 months later, they are saddled with a bill. They have no idea where the bill came from, and now they have to pay it. There is this statistic that 1 out of 6, that is nearly 17% of credit problems and bankruptcies are because of healthcare. And while, again, not all of these are because of just the claims process, but a lot of the angst that comes is because, hey, there was some human error, there was some pre-authorization that didn't happen, and a lot of that stuff. So while we were focusing on this whole ensemble of technologies that we were building, and as Hong said, there are many. When you're talking NLP, it's not just typical n-grams, bag of words, word to vec, but you have to have your engine understand the domain of healthcare. And one good starting point is SNOMED City, which is an ontology for healthcare. The engine has to understand the healthcare domain, has to understand the traversal between various codes like ICD-9, 10, CPT, and so on, and also understand the interrelationship between doctor's diagnosis and all these codes. So we had built a strong engine there, and what we found was, hey, we can decrease the friction that people see. And that was the first solution that he showed. He said, hey, maybe just like what we found was, I was talking to some of my friends who have founded RCM companies. They have legions of people, tens of thousands of people sitting in back offices transcribing these uh, uh, explanation of benefits documents, these remittance advices, and then it gets into a digital form, and then the whole process works. So we found a way using our engine, tweaking it a little, modifying it. We found a way to completely automate the whole process, and it's 1,000 times faster, much higher accuracy at 99%, and really the outcome of that process is now claims are getting resolved much faster. And as a result, this particular situation I said, where the patient has claims which are getting, they're getting these bills 6, 12 months later, so that doesn't happen. And these errors of omission and commission are able to be identified much faster. And overall, it's good for the provider who gets paid earlier. It's much better for the patient. They don't have these issues, or at least most of them. And it's also good for the payer because it's better customer service ultimately for uh, the insurance beneficiary. So that's how we pivoted. We're happy to say that we are working with some really large organizations, some of the biggest organizations in tackling this whole downstream process. And we feel very good about it because ultimately, as I said, the vision really was to make healthcare, the whole process happy for all the stakeholders. And this is certainly an area that needed some attention. So, and this is just one example. There are various patterns of how you would pivot, but one pattern that I've alluded to is if you have a strong technology and if it's extensible, then maybe you can find a faster use case which has better product market fit and better time to market, and hey, maybe that works faster for you. So it's very common that companies pivot, and it's actually good for them if they do so because uh, there's always value to be unearthed, and if you've invested in technology, it's a great way to unlock value.
Very insightful. And of course, your company has come a very long way from the very beginning of being a startup. But if you had to look back like retrospectively, I mean, what were some of the bigger mistakes that you made at the beginning? And what are some of the better pieces of advice that you could offer to somebody who wants to start a startup for their own?
Yeah. So there's this guy called Bob Ross
Oh yeah.
who used to paint for PBS, and he would say there are no mistakes. There's only happy accidents. Ross. And yeah, when you look back, right? Yeah, you could call them mistakes, but a lot of times, you learn, and as long as you are willing to learn, uh, uh, you know, I don't think it's necessarily. In fact, Amazon has a leadership principle. It's called R write a lot, and it's not necessarily what it means on the surface. It's not like, hey, you're always right. It's like when you're right, you're right, but when you're wrong, you're learning so that you don't make that same mistake again. So yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of happy accidents.
Yeah.
So and that's how you learn. So see, you should have a co-founder because being a single founder is a tremendous amount of stress, and you don't necessarily you don't have people playing to their strengths. So that's one issue. The other thing is you should always have folks who are in the domain that you're focused on, and they have some deep insight in the domain. So the way we managed that is we had a very strong advisory board, and they had that domain expertise. But then it's also good to have such people as part of your founding team, because now they share in the risk. There's a story about the Spartans that when they would go and take their ships and attack somebody, they would actually burn their ships. And what that tells the opposition is, hey, I'm either going out on a shield, on my shield, or I'm going to win. So it's important to have people who are as committed. And so it's good to have co-founders who have that domain expertise as well. And finally, it's very important to capitalize the company right, to seek the right kind of capital, to plan for scale. And in the early days, not focus so much on path to profitability, but focus on being relevant to your customer and to improve the quality of the product. Because once that happens, the revenues will come, and once you have scale, the profitability also will come. So there are rules of thumb, benchmarks that people in Silicon Valley use, and there is some rationale to that. That in the early stages they focus on how sticky is your product, and then later on revenue traction, and then ultimately on profitability. So and these are all places where I struggled, because I was a first time entrepreneur, because I've always been in a large company, and a lot of those things where they just happened. And here, as a startup founder, you have to deal with all of them and make sure that you're ultimately responsible to making all of it happen. But yeah, if you're founding a startup, having the right set of co-founders, I think, is really very, very critical. Having all of them completely bought in, burning their ships, is also very critical. And focusing on the first few customers, ensuring that your product, you see, there's this notion MVP, minimum viable product, and Amazon has this thing. It's about I think it's called the minimum something. It's basically something that excites the customer. So it's not viable. It's what's the minimum that you build that can actually excite your customer. So as long as you focus on that, then I think revenues will come, and then the path to profitability also will come. I mean, I can't necessarily go into the specifics of all the mistakes I made, but yeah, these are typical mistakes that startup founders make, and I have certainly made more than my share.
Yeah, and you did mention the importance of having like a co-founder and a team, because of course the financial burden on like just one person to create a startup is usually a bit too high. But with regard to finances, how did that look when you were first starting your startup, and how did you approach the Dallas market specifically in procuring customers to make a profitable product?
So Dallas is an amazing location to start. Dallas, there's the whole DFW Metroplex has 8 million plus folks, and there is no reason it cannot be like Silicon Valley. There's no reason it cannot be like Route 128, which is the MIT Cambridge area. There is, and for these reasons, there is a very strong market of talent. So there is UTD, there is SMU, there is UTA, and then there's a lot of local talent in the Dallas market, a lot of extremely good schools, both private and public. So there is tremendous access to talent in the Dallas market. And it's all grounded talent. So it's not people who are expecting 5% of the company with 0 years of experience. So I think it's really grounded. Second, there are many industries in Dallas. So telecom, healthcare, real estate, there's a lot of industries. So there is a lot of areas that you could focus on, you could build, because you have access to the one most important thing, product market fit, which means for that you need customers. You have access to customers. And there is a lot of capital in Dallas. In the early days, in the 90s, there was a fund called Seven Rosen Funds, and Austin Ventures also used to make investments in Dallas. But now, with the world being much smaller, and also with COVID, a lot of business is getting transacted virtually. So you have even access to big name venture capital. So you can have Sequoia, you can have Bessemer, you can have big private equity groups like Carlyle or Goldman Sachs. So I don't think location, you don't need to be on Sand Hill Road or University Avenue in Palo Alto to get top quality VC or private equity money. So I think Dallas, but again, I think there is a still, and maybe it's a good thing. The way startups are valued in Dallas still, it's more on an EBITDA basis, and when you're making big technology bets, that's not necessarily the best way to value a company. But again, I think Dallas is getting there. I think if you look at some of the recent exits that we've had in Dallas, I think there is tremendous potential. But again, having a focus on EBITDA does ensure discipline. Like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So I'll give you an example. I think Genentech, the initial capital they raised was only $300,000, and then they ultimately sold the company for 30 billion. So yeah, there's and it's a pure life sciences research company. So yeah, if there's a lot more money available, your needs will expand to fill the capital. So that's there. But I think broadly, I think we're just seeing the beginning of Dallas emerging as a very strong hub for startups. I mean, we're already seeing some tremendous traction. I think if I think all it takes is a few really successful examples, which are unicorns, and then I think the system will dramatically change. But I already see the path to that happening. It has all the ingredients. It has a great talent pool. It has what is very important, which is access to customers, and finally there is capital. Though the capital, I think maybe a couple more cycles, and then the capital will be focused on the right set of metrics at the right time in the company's life phases. But I think it's really getting there, and I think there's going to be amazing opportunities in the next 10-15 years in Dallas itself.
Well, certainly, yeah, we've seen some crazy tremendous growth in Dallas, and despite like a good area, good finances, and everything, I mean, oftentimes, as you said, like a lot of it hinges on like the mindset of the founders, what they're able to do, and how they're able to lead their team. For you, what's like the worst piece of advice that you often hear thrown around regarding startups and how to like, get your respective business going?
Yeah, you should never start a company hoping to make an exit.
Yeah.
So you should never do the startup for money, because if you look at probability, so expectancy is probability times outcome, right? So if you're doing it for the money, then there are lots of better ways to work in a company and not carry that risk and do well. A startup is inherently very, very risky. So don't start something expecting that the exit is going to make you rich. If somebody gives you that advice, that is, I don't think that's the right advice. I think the only reason to start a company is when you really, really passionately believe there is an opportunity and that you can actually help humanity. And the question is, if not you, then who? Right? You feel so passionately about it that you have to do this because it's making life better for some folks. So, and if you're successful, then the exit will come and all the other things that come with it. So, there's better ways to make money. You could buy a lottery ticket, and yeah, but a startup is really, really hard work. And it's not, see, for every Facebook, there were so many other companies that failed, MySpace, Friendster, and so on. So it's a lot of times there are some things within your control and sometimes things which are not in your control. So unless you very, very passionately believe in something, it's not a good idea to start.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and we see a lot of people, specifically in Dallas, of course, starting their companies. As you said earlier, it's very big with that activity, and it has a possibility of being like next Silicon Valley even. But with regard to Dallas specifically, how do you think the startup scene will change in the near and far future?
So I think we have the right ecosystem in place, and it will take some time. So if you're in healthcare, there are these incubators like Health Wildcatters, run by Hubert Zajcek. And then if you're in technology, there are tech incubators as well. So I think it's really, again, it is Bob Metcalf. Metcalf said the power of a network is proportional to the square of the number of nodes. So the stronger the network of angel investors, startup founders, uh, and then follow on investors, and it's a melting pot, and suddenly it's like a game of life, right? You start, there's some, and it takes some amount of uh, size for it to stick, and then from there, or it's like a fusion reaction, right? There's a
Yeah.
critical mass, and once you hit that mass, and then it just takes on a life of itself. And I think Dallas may be getting there, maybe is already there. So like you have Rock Health in Silicon Valley for healthcare, you have Y Combinator. So there are people, well-meaning people, very passionate people who are building those ecosystems in Dallas itself. And I think a few more cycles, a few more cohorts of people coming out of those ecosystems, and then suddenly, before you know, uh, it will take on a life of itself. And uh, I think Dallas will be a big hub. So I think it's only I don't think it's a question of if. I think it's just a question of when,
Yeah.
and it's very likely that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, as you just said earlier, Dallas is taking on a life and a personality of its own. And with regard to startups in Dallas, what do you think a startup, or maybe even your company specifically, had to do differently because it's based in Dallas? Like, is there any specifics?
Yeah, you have to watch the dollar. You have to be extremely frugal when you start. And in the early days of Silicon Valley, that is how it started. When Fred Terman inspired Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard to start Hewlett Packard, when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak reached out to Bill Hewlett for spare parts to build their first personal computer so they could play, Atari games. All of those guys, they stretched the dollar. Do you know that Sun Microsystems, in their first business case with Scott McNealy and Costa, they only asked for $20,000 as seed money. That's all. And then Sun Microsystems was born. So uh, it's good, and it enforces discipline. So if you're starting a company in Dallas, uh, you have to be frugal. You have to focus on frugal innovation, and it also forces you to fail fast because you can't keep funding an idea which is not going to work. And then if you're able to get the right kind of traction, the right kind of product market fit, then yeah, you can raise the capital within Dallas or from outside. But I think what I had to do in Dallas is be frugal, because I invested my own money first to build the product. So also, I could design it right, because I'm an engineer by training. So I could build a solution that I was proud of. And at the same time, there are lots of local companies, and so you had access to customers. And without access to customers, without actually testing how your solution really works in production, you don't make any headway. So that's how I had to be very frugal, and B, I had to convince customers or partners to work with us. And what we did actually, because we didn't have the kind of budgets that IBM Watson had. We couldn't get Bob Dylan and Serena Williams to talk about our solution for healthcare. So what we had to do is we decided to, again, there are patterns, and no matter what kind of problem you face, somebody has faced it earlier, and they have a pattern. So Intel had this thing called Intel Inside, that they revamped their chip architecture. There was a guy called Vinod Dham and the Pentium chip, and they had a campaign called Intel Inside. And so we said, hey, Felix Inside. So we said, we will not focus on building a strong sales team and trying to, sell to large customers. We will partner with organizations. We have channel partners. We will focus on what we do best. And that's how we stretch the dollar, invest most of the 95 cents, 98 cents of our investment in for every dollar on building a better and better product, and work with our channel partners, because they have access to customers. They have the reputation in the market, and work with them and essentially turbocharge their solutions. So again, necessity was the mother of invention for us in that sense. So we started with a channel partner strategy, and it actually helped us pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors, of course, and it's very insightful, like the different substantiating factors that you had to encounter to grow your business and operate successfully in Dallas. But with regard to the Dallas market, do you plan to explore other markets, and how specifically do you expand or plan in the future to expand in Dallas?
By other markets, do you mean geographical markets?
Yes.
Oh yeah, so we are so we are a cloud native solution, and many of our customers are actually not just located in Dallas; they are in other locations as well. So that's the advantage of being cloud native, and so you can so that's the advantage of being cloud native. I'm sorry, I missed the second part of your question.
Oh, so the question was essentially, how do you plan to expand in Dallas in the future? And also, like, if you plan to expand in other markets, how do you plan to go about that?
Yeah, so we are getting some inbound requests from outside continental United States, so from the Middle East and other locations. So we are actively considering those at this point in time. But in the Dallas market itself, yeah, there is still a lot of scope for us to expand. And in fact, we also have inbound interest coming from other industry verticals as well. So how do you plan to expand? See, you have to be very careful, because at least, see, as a startup, all of your partners and all of your customers are taking a risk. They're taking a bet to work with you. So on your part, it is very important to try to do whatever you can to reduce risk and minimize risk. And so as a startup, you can't afford to fail. So whatever promises you make, you have to deliver. So how you do that is you are very judicious, you're very intentional in deciding how much you can scale. And this goes back to Bob Metcalf and how do you plan for success? But it has to be by design, and you have to be very, very intentional. So you only take on what you can deliver, and you under promise and over deliver. So we are being very judicious. Some of the inbound requests we decline because we don't believe we are there yet, and some of those requests from other industries also we decline because we don't think it is aligned with our corporate strategy. And these decisions are made by the board and by the management team.
Yeah, and especially with regard to like pieces of software for the healthcare industry, there's like HIPAA certifications and so many requirements with regard to like data security, because of course the nature of the information that you guys are processing is very confidential. So for your company specifically, like how do you deal with data security and data security policies?
So that's absolutely important. And so there are standards, high trust standards in healthcare. There is a standard called HIPAA for privacy and data security. And then there are enabling standards like SOC 1, SOC 2 for compliance. Then there are audits that you do at the same time. But ultimately, a lot of this is common sense. You have to treat every aspect of data as if it were yours. And how well would you guard your data? You have to do the same thing for anybody else's data. In most cases where it is PHI, personal health information, or PII, identifiable information, you have to have something called de-identification, and then it's a whole spectrum all the way to anonymizing data. But you try to be again very pragmatic and de-identify information. Then you have to encrypt the data, whether it is at rest or in motion. So there are technologies that enable that. And of course, when you have data on the cloud, you have to be extremely careful, not just with the technology, but also have the processes and mechanisms in place so that inadvertently nobody, is sharing or through just bad practice causing a security hole. So it's a combination of all of these. So there's an alphabet soup of standards, and then there are various approaches to security using public-private key, infrastructure, and so on. But ultimately, it comes down to a set of simple, common sense, auditable mechanisms that you diligently follow to make sure that no data is compromised. And I'd like to, I'd like to also ask Hong, like, how does he, like, does he want to add anything to what I just said?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Siva. Yeah, so to us, yeah, as you said, so as the application in clinical domain, the PHI is very sensitive. So for us, the cloud service provider should have HIPAA compliance. So that's why we're using AWS. So they do have the HIPAA compliance. So it's okay to send data to their instances and use the model or module to do the calculation and generate the output, then index to the database services AWS provided, like Elasticsearch or RDS. So it's totally safe because they do not have the permission to access the user data. This is externally. So internally, in our company, we need to sharing data, like transfer data, sometimes do some annotations. So we have to pull out the EHR data to local, sometimes to the Google Sheets. All these activities should be done under the company's VPN, so we can never share any piece of the information to the public devices. And having mentioned recently we are trying to apply GPT-3. I'm not sure if you guys heard about GPT-3. It's the most latest version of GPT model released by OpenAI. So different from GPT-2. GPT-2 is totally open source, so we can definitely fine tune the model locally or in the AWS cloud. That's fine. But for GPT-3, OpenAI just started to to earn money with it. So all the activities like model prediction, model fine tuning should be done in their server, not our side. So we can only use their API to do all kinds of activities. But the problem is OpenAI, they do not have HIPAA compliance. So whatever what data we send to them should be totally de-identified. So now we are struggling with a solid de-identification module. With that module, we need to make sure every piece of information shared to their server are de-identified. But finally, we got approval. But yeah, they need to work through us on our de-identification code before using GPT-3 in our product.
Yeah, and certainly, Mr. Kong, your company employs a lot of AI, but specifically, how accurate does the AI aspect need to be to reach your success metric personally?
Yeah, this is a very good question. It's case by case. So for us, normally we have two goalkeepers. The first goalkeeper is very traditionally like the F1 score is kind of balance between precision and recall. Internally, we have a cutoff. So also it's case by case. Sometimes 0.8, sometimes it's 0.85. But the tolerance on precision and recall, sometimes they're different. In some cases, we can bear with low precision. We can bear with low recall, but not low precision. For example, we have a lot of model are at sentence level. Particularly, we predict each sentence with some kind of feature. But eventually, the prediction would be on patient level, which means we'll merge all the sentence level prediction on the encounter level. So then if the model has a low recall, that's fine. If the same feature is not identified in node number 1, but it could be identified in node number 2, eventually it has a high likelihood to be identified. Then at the encounter level, the recall, the recall would be good. But for some cases, like some generative tasks, there's no categorized prediction. We can calculate a F1 somehow, because there's no false positive, false negative. It's generative tasks. For example, in one of our model, we are trying to make a summarization based on the patient, all the notes from one patient. So we provide an overall summary on it. So you cannot say, okay, this summary is totally 100% correct, and that one is totally wrong. Most of the time, even for the same case, you could summarize the key information in different ways. They are all correct, right? So there's no F1 could be calculated. So in this case, we use another method. It's similar to kind of Turing test, but it's not Turing test, but we got the idea from Turing test. Here's how we do that. So we do sampling first, and let our model summarize, make the summarization, and then we hide all the model result and ask the human panel to do the summarization. Then we have a third party, which is also in our internal employee, but from clinical team, a third people to review the human result and model result side by side. And his goal is trying to identify, okay, can you identify which summary is from model which summary is from human.
Mhm.
Yeah, regardless right and wrong, your job is just try to discriminate between human decision and model decision. So after this review is done, we have afterward statistic method to calculate, okay, if there's a significant difference between human decisions and the model decision. If the significance is not high enough, we could say, okay, even human cannot tell which result come from human, which result come from model, then the model is good to go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And specifically, how much data do you need to collect to make your initial predictions? And how do you go about collecting enough data to make those accurate predictions that you were describing?
Yeah, cool. So for deep learning models, the more the better for the training set, right? But
Mhm.
the reality is, you may not believe. So from our side, the reality is most of the time we start from nothing,
Mhm.
zero annotations, zero training set. Yeah, I will take the COVID example again. So in the year 2020, we did develop a COVID model. So COVID was brand new at that time. So there's no gold standard, there's no annotations. So, but we only have 1 or 2 months to develop this product and start to serve serve our clients.
Mhm.
Then our strategy is we have to start from somewhere. So the rule-based model could be a good choice to start. Specifically, we sit down with our clinical team and decide, okay, what keywords could be generalized to has a early detect of the COVID related informations.
Mhm.
So we could start from very naive keywords like just COVID, like COVID test, positive, negative, just a bag of word. And based on the very simple rule-based model, we could at least identify some sentences which has high potential to be used as a training set. And then we do the human review. It's very time-consuming work. And after the first round review, we could have some true positives and false positives. And
Mhm.
with that data side, we have our first training set. And then we train the first version of model. The model was very bad, obviously, but at least we have something. And then we applied this first version model on the real-time data and made some prediction. Then we collect the prediction. We collect the positive prediction first and ask the clinical team to review again, from which they could identify which are true positive, which are false positives. And those decisions can, of course, put back to the training set. And at the same time, we'll sample the negative data set, which model didn't label them as positive. We will sample some. And from there, they do another round of annotation to identify some true negatives and false negatives. Then similarly, the result will put back to the training set. Then we have the second round. So we did the same thing. This is human in the loop, right? So we did the same thing again and again. So normally after probably 4 or 5 rounds, we had a relatively good model, which means we could pass the first goalkeeper, like the precision or recall, or sometimes balance the F1 score, and the model is good to go. Then we went to the second goalkeeper. So we apply the model on real-time data again and focus on the false positive data only. We're going to see, okay, if there's any stupid errors in the false positive, we can bear with false positives, but if they are stupid false positives, our clients will lose patience on us. For
Yeah.
example, if it's an insurance model, we're trying to identify if the patient has any insurance issue, but the positive sentence totally has no relationship with insurance. It's talking about something else. Then our client will get mad. So yeah,
Mhm.
this is second goalkeeper. So after it passed the second goalkeeper, then yeah, we'll release it in the product, but always keep an eye on the predictions and the user feedback. It's never done. We have to periodically do another one sampling and annotation and update of model, especially for the COVID model, because as the time passes, we have more and more positive data in the United States, right? All you guys remember the trend in 2020. So the cases, the scenarios, the way they phrase the sentences always change. So we need to do the human loop again and again to keep the model up to date.
So obviously, it can't be understated the importance of like data sampling in this larger process. But with regard to your company, they work for, how does your data starting out when you were first sampling differ from your data now that you have, you know, a significant larger portion as you've been sampling for longer periods of time?
Basically, they should come from the same data set or cohort, we call it.
Mhm.
The data in the training set, the data in the real time should be from the same cohort. But the reality is, we can't always make sure our training data covering all the scenarios in the real world data, right? We can only making sure they are very close. So as I mentioned in the last question, so once we do the human loop again, we could at least making sure the training set could cover probably the majority, 90%, 80% of the true scenarios in the real-time data, and the model could get a relatively good result. There's no perfect model in the world, so we're just trying to make it look better and better and make less mistake, like our clients to get some help from it.
Yeah, and how critical is AI to your business offering, and what does it help towards? Like, is it more of a speed thing, like, or is it more of like replacing human behavior?
Well, yeah. So how critical? Yeah, I have to say since last year or the year before last year, the AI started become more and more critical to our company. So now probably more than 80% of the models are deep learning based. We're using all kinds of most advanced deep learning models to replace our existing rule based or some logic based models. So it is very important to our company. But yeah, at the same time, you guys must know. So deep learning performs good because it has tons of parameters in the neural network to maintain the prediction accuracy and to cover all the potential scenarios for that domain. That's very expensive. Specifically, we have to open more and more GPU instances from AWS. Our AWS bills, keep increasing month by month. So yeah, so you're asking about speed. Yeah, the speed is slow, I have to say. But as long as you open more and more resources, the speed could be faster and faster, and eventually you could get a kind of sweet spot between efficiency and the cost. So the speed is not a key problem here. Okay, so if our goal is to replacing the human being, no. As I said at the beginning of this discussion, we are not hoping to replace the human being, especially in the clinical domain. Our clients are clinicians. They have MDs. They have tons of clinical knowledge in their mind. We can now say, at least for nowadays, we can now say a deep learning model, no matter how advanced it is, it could eventually replace human beings, replace healthcare providers. No, we're just trying to help them to make their life easier, to make their decision more accurate. Yeah.
Well, it's very fascinating to hear how far a deep learning model can go and its practical application within your business. So now we're going to be moving on to open Q&A, where we'll take questions from the chat. We already have actually a couple that were mentioned earlier, so I can list off a couple, and whoever wants to answer them can answer the question if you have like a particular strong answer that you'd like to give. So the first question that I'll ask from the chat is it's for Mr. Hong. Thank you for your time today. How would you describe your day-to-day work, and what sort of skills or certifications would you recommend for students who want to pursue a line of work that you have currently?
Yeah, cool. So for me, I'm kind of I won't say different, but kind of special. I'm playing dual roles in my company. Supposedly modeling like my title said, NLP applied scientist, and I also covering some engineering work. So all of our models, AI engines deployment, also my part of my job. So as a student, I will recommend to at least focusing on the uh, the ML machine learning or NLP theories. So starting from the knowledge about basic machine learning algorithm, although they are very classic, but they are still very important, like SVM and naive Bayes, random forest, so on and so forth. Although less people are using them, but those methods could give you better understanding of machine learning theory. And also it, for AI, yeah, also I highly suggest to always keep an eye on the AI development, especially. I'm not sure where your focus is, either NLP or more general domain or image processing. Anyway, the only difference is the embedding side. So how to transfer the input to kind of a matrix. But after that, the model, all the scenario of the model are I won't say exactly same, but very similar. So reading papers is very important. I don't believe you can learn everything from your courses, your classroom. You have to keep an eye on the papers, on the sometimes some forums, or maybe even some from some YouTubers. Yeah, so we are living in a very informative world. So there are all kinds of platforms we can learn all kinds of knowledge. Yeah. So and also if you are interested in industrial domain, probably you need to uh, have some additional weapons in your weapon pool, like coding, of course. I believe a lot of you guys are using like lead code or something like that to pass at least the first round of the big company's interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important as well. Although most of the uh, coding skills are not useful after you join the company, but it's a very good practice for you to understand the engineering work. And also in the company, we are not always ending with the modeling. We need to deploy our model. We need to balance the balance the cost and the efficiency. So probably you also need to keep an eye on the most advanced pipeline deployment tools, like Mr. Siva already mentioned, some like Airflow, Kubernetes, like some cloud services, especially AWS. I believe more than 80% or 70% startup are using AWS. There are a lot of services in AWS, RDS, Airflow, Kubernetes, EKS, so on and so forth. There are a lot of good tutorial on them, so maybe you need some basic knowledge on that. I believe all of this will be helpful for your interview.
Awesome. Well, thank you for letting us on the different facets that you should really focus on to land a job in that area. Because of course, with school and everything, it's just kind of hard to discern like a path to take. But that was very useful. And our next question, I believe, is directed towards Mr. Siva. The question goes as follows: what are some new startups that we should learn from and take a look at that you know of?
See, my vision is very limited. Could you expand on the question? So to
Yeah, like if you know of any startups that you've seen in the past that not a lot of other people know of, because like of course we know like Apple began as a startup or something like that, but like a lesser known startup that you believe could provide some insight into someone who wants to start their own startup, that you know of.
okay, so maybe the best way to answer this is Look at the incubators, look at the really strong seed or Series A investors, and look at the startups that they uh, are backing. That is one way to go about it. So, for example, if you are interested in healthcare, you could look at the cohort that Rock Health, for example,
Mhm.
is supporting. If you're looking at uh, so there's different types of investors who focus on different uh, classes of companies, uh, and there are different types of accelerators like Y Combinator. So you could look at those companies and see and look at the startups that they are uh, that they are backing. I mean, really, there are so many companies focusing on so many cool things. So I wouldn't necessarily be the right person to identify. But there is one thing I do want to say is there is a lot of me too. Hey, I'm also a startup. I'm also doing this. So if you're really trying to learn and you're trying to emulate companies, look at I think there was a paper by Peter Thiel about how startups are less risky nowadays. They aren't making big bets anymore.
Mhm.
And if I find that, I will forward it to you.
Awesome.
But really, see, you should look for the startups which are really trying to solve a critical problem. There was a time in Silicon Valley, there were like 15 or 20 companies focused on pet foods. There was pets.com, and then there's a whole bunch of them. So, uh, and you will see similarly, there'll be many companies who do something a little bit better, a little bit different. But I think uh, if folks at UTD have a passion for something, so for example, they have a passion for computer vision, uh, then there are some people that you normally follow. So Andrew Ng is a person that you would follow. You would see the kind of startups that he's working with, or people that he's associated with that they work that they're working on. So that is one area. Uh, if you're focused on NLP, there's a whole different ecosystem. Uh, it started with Bird, and then now it's expanded, and then that's a very exciting space. So there are different kinds of. So it depends. Is it technology? Is it a particular domain? And then you look at uh, where the smart money goes, right? So if you're for example, if you're interested in healthcare, then there is Venrock, uh, and there's Francisco Partners, and then so you see the kind of companies that they are funding, and then okay, uh, these companies are really doing something different.
Mhm.
So there are different ways of looking at it. So I don't think there is a generic answer.
Mhm.
You have to identify what's your passion. Is it technology? Is it a particular domain? Then you have to do the research yourself and identify who the key investors in those areas are. Where does the smart money go? And not the money that just makes noise, but where is the smart money that goes there? Where are the smart investors investing money? And where are the smart people, who are writing all the papers and the patents? Where are they going? And that's probably the best way to identify, which kind of company you should be tracking.
Certainly. Yeah, I very much like the anecdote of like watching where like the smartest investments go and where like the bigger, more smarter corporations invest. So you can like sort of to some degree at least emulate that or understand why it's successful in order to create a startup of your own that would be of a similar level of success. It was very insightful. And now I believe we have our final question. This one could be answered by either individual or whoever would like to. So the question is, digging deeper into healthcare and privacy, how do you see this evolving? And do you see EHR interoperability being a major factor in it? So it's like, how do you see healthcare privacy evolving over time as our technology advances?
Okay, I'll take a crack at it. And, uh, I think interop is very, very critical. It is inevitable. It's going to happen at some point. It's going to happen not because of legislation. It's not going to happen because of mandates. It's not going to happen because of NC, HIT said it. It's going to happen because customers ultimately are going to demand interop. And that is when it's going to happen. And there are standards, and then there are standards. The problem is the initial standards were not good enough, like HL7, and now there are new standards like FIRE. So they enable interop, but then what's different between financial interop and healthcare interop is the complexity of the data. So when you're sitting at your desktop and you're uh, buying stock of any company, within a fraction of a second, this data is going through many systems and running many transactions, a database, two-phase commit transactions, and ultimately that sale happens and that transaction happens. And that's because there are these well-established mainstream interop protocols uh, between financial institutions. Now, there is no reason we cannot get to that situation in healthcare, but it is not as easy as it looks on surface. On surface, yeah, the data in EHR itself, okay, slightly, uh, uh, it's well regimented, it's well formed, it's structured to some extent. But then there's a lot of insight by various studies, like 80% of insight, which is in the doctor's notes, which is in unstructured information. And that is just the way it is. And uh, so you have to have a way to be able to share all of that. And of course, there's privacy and security associated with it as well. So these aren't engineering challenges that can't be solved. They have been solved in other industries. Uh, in healthcare, there are, of course, legitimate issues with privacy and security, but there's also companies which are trying to monetize the data, and then they're trying to ring fence the data within their own systems. And at some point in time, those walls will break. There are various initiatives like the Commonwealth Alliance, etc. And now large technology companies are stepping in, such as Google, trying to build these healthcare API that allow you to share data, across systems. But uh, I think it's tremendous progress, but it's still a long ways. But again, as I said, it is an imperative because healthcare is not episodic. It is not, hey, I go to a doctor, I get some treatment, and then I come back. It is actually a continuum of care. So if you look at health and wellness, all the labs that you took, all the A1C values that you had over time, all the inpatient visits you had, all the uh, lab tests you had, all the other comorbidities you had, the medications you take across time, all of those things are relevant, and all of those things need to be able to interrupt with each other. So uh, again, I don't think I know the technology exists. I think uh, it is when uh, the demand from the consumers becomes critical enough where it becomes inevitable. I think that is where uh, this will ultimately happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for illuminating for us the advancement of data in these in healthcare over time and how it will change in the future. I believe that is all the time that we had allotted for this AI showcase. So thank you so much, guys, for attending, Mr. Kang and Mr. Siva. We really appreciate it. Now, if you'd like, you can connect with both of these corporations via LinkedIn or check out their website and their careers page if perhaps you're looking for like an internship or something of that nature. This is the one for Felix Healthcare. So just like take a screenshot or maybe visit their website. I'll leave the page on for about half a minute and then I'll switch to the to the other one.
Is this a UTD only like
No,
organization or?
no. Oh, I mean AAS. You mean? Are you referring to AAS?
Yeah, is it
Oh, yes. Yeah, AAS is UTD only. Sorry,
oh, all right.
I misunderstood. Yeah,
Cool.
and then here's the second one. We have pieces. So here's the career page, their support email, and of course, their LinkedIn profile for the company if you'd like to take a closer look. I'll also leave this on the page about half a minute. And then after this, I will show a QR code. For those of you members who attended the event, you can scan the QR code essentially to just report that you attended the event for membership. All right. So let me switch to the final slide. Here is the attendance code, QR code, and the link to log your attendance. Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Kong and Mr. Siva, for attending and presenting. We really appreciated it, and your insight was very valuable to us. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And here, I'll like switch back to the QR code. Actually, so if you want to get it, because it was like only like about half a minute, but the event's over, and you saw this final slide. So thank you for watching it if you did watch it. Yeah. So we're down there until like 7:01 probably. Right here, final slide. Thank you for attending. I will go now. So thank you so much.